Welcome back. The game tonight was two storylines. One, national pride. Two, injuries. So we'll discuss this, and it is going to be interesting to see when this tournament's done on Thursday night, how many teams are going to be dealing with injuries as a result of this tournament, and what kind of conversations we have at that point. Because I do think there are some of these injuries that, if they're lingering and if they continue on into the rest of the regular season, they can affect the playoff picture, which is one of the reasons why all the way back to when I was in high school, I wasn't a huge fan of international tournaments because whether it was the Canada Cup or whatever it was, I would kind of be upset if a player on a team I rooted for got hurt. Like, great, now we're host. And I understand that there are people who love the international tournaments and everything, but for me, I am a National Hockey League fan who loves the NHL teams, the NHL regular season and playoffs, and so that is just my point of view. I know it is not the commonly held point of view, but I've always had that concern of I'd rather not see players get hurt at these tournaments, and not just for teams I root for, but just in general. So it's Ersson versus Ottinger, and Ersson being in the net is interesting because Gustafsson can't play, Olmark can't play, the flu's running through the locker room, and as soon as I saw Ersson, gonna be honest, I thought, well, that's tough news for Sweden because Ersson's had a rough year in Philadelphia. Um, After tonight's game, I'm starting to wonder if Ersson is the issue, or maybe goaltending's not the issue with Philly. Maybe we've been approaching this all wrong. Maybe the advanced stats are wrong. Maybe it's just a matter of goaltenders in Philadelphia just not generally playing well and the defense in front of them and all that other stuff. If you are Danny Briere, I think the trade value of Ersson might have gone up tonight. So it's Ersson versus Ottinger. There was no Austin Matthews, no Matthew Tkachuk, no Charlie McAvoy, no Austin Matthews. So the USA playing without four players. Now, some of this is resting players, some of this is injuries, and we will find out on Thursday how much of this is to do with injuries. So 34 seconds in, Kreider buries a rebound on the rush to put the Americans ahead 1-0. And so this is not the kind of start you wanted if you're Sweden, right? Werenski and Eichel with the assists. Then we get a post for Larkin on a net drive. The teams trade turnovers. The shots are 2-1 for the Americans at 3.5 minutes. Nelson has a rush chance that's blocked. Werenski with a net drive chance that's held. And Zach Werenski's played fantastic in this tournament. I'm going to go on ahead and say it. I think Werenski should be the favorite for the Norris Trophy right now. I know how well Hughes and Makar play, but I do think that Werenski should be the favorite right now to win the Norris Trophy. Larkin's denied on a rebound and close. Hedman has a chance that's kicked aside. Sweden presses at 7 minutes, but they're kept to the outside. There's a delay game call that gives the USA a power play. Early clear, the Americans cycle. Another clear. Power play's killed off. Then Sweden gets a turn on the power play. Hedman fires one wide. There's a shorthanded rush by Eichel that ends up ending that power play, but Sweden did manage 3 shots on it. And then at 13:36, Nyquist tips one through Ottinger, Carlson and Arvidsson with the assists. It's a 1-1 tie, and the crowd a little bit quieter after that. The U.S. does press to respond. There's a net feed to Gensel, near miss there. Werenski has a shot that's held as the Americans press. Sweden presses with 3.5 minutes left. The teams trade turnovers. Sanderson has a screenshot that saves things get pushing a hold by Ersson. And then in 1904, Jesper Bratt. He goes past a screen from the left circle. Nylander with the assist. So a tipped shot, one past the screen, and next thing you know, it's 2-1 in favor of Sweden after the first period. Second period, Brady Tkachuk not on the bench. I think he only played 155 in the first period. He did not return to the game. That has to be frustrating. One thing I noticed with Tkachuk was he was throwing a lot of hits, and when I see guys doing that and they're throwing the back-to-back, my first thought is, don't get reckless out there, you could get hurt. That's the one thing that I think of when I watch players doing that. Anyways, good early forechecking by the Americans. Sanderson to Boldy, near miss there. Slavin has a shot that's held, and then there's some pushing. The teams trade rushes. We get a power play for the Swedes. Brady Tkachuk wouldn't return as announced at that point in the game. Sweden cycles, pucks cleared out, power plays killed off, no shots. So it does not give Sweden any kind of momentum out of that. If anything, it favors the Americans, right? The only shot on net 6 minutes in is by the Americans. The shots would pick up as the second period went along. Sweden presses are kept to the outside. Hughes has a rush chance that's saved. Then there's a crossbar for Sanderson. Nelson's denied before he bumps Ersson. Ersson was looking for a call. I think if Ersson hadn't fallen down the way that he did, he might have got that call, but because of the way he fell down, I think the referee went, I'm not calling it. But either way, that's allowed to go. And it felt like the penalty standard was higher. And it feels like the penalty standard's been higher throughout this tournament than what we see during the regular season. We can have that debate sometime. You guys want to have that debate now? We can. But at any rate, so the standard seems to be a bit higher, even though we did get some power plays tonight. The teams trade rushes. Sweden presses at the half. Then there's an offensive zone penalty by Forsberg. Not a great call to put the U.S. on the power play. And I don't mean not a great call by the official. I mean just you don't want to take that penalty 200 feet from your own net. So they cycle. There's a post for Jack Eichel. Werenski has a deflected shot that saved. That power play's killed off. Sweden presses with 6.5 minutes left. The U.S. then presses a minute later in the game. Raymond can't bury one in close as the teams were taking turns with some pressure at the net. Then there's a pad save on a Brodin slapper in the final minute. It stays 2-1 for Sweden after 2. Third period, there's a post for Eichel on a rush. There's an early press by the Americans that follows that. But then there's an offensive zone penalty by Fox, which puts Sweden on the power play. Neither the fans nor Fox nor the American players agreed with that. And the Canadian announcers on Sportsnet as well thought it was, I don't know if soft penalty is the way to go with it, because that's a word that gets thrown around way too much in hockey these days. I think I hear soft more than I hear it in relation to, say, Dairy Queen with soft serve. But at any rate, everybody disagreed with the penalty, but Sweden 0 for 5 in the tournament, and this power play wasn't fantastic either. There's an early cycle. It's cleared out again. Forsberg fires one high, cleared off. So Pettersson has a shot that's blocked. His next chance is held. And that's the only shot on that power play that I saw. That power play was killed off. Sweden presses at 4.5 minutes, but the shots are 4-3 for the Americans, 6.5 minutes in. U.S. draws a power play. There's an early clear. The Americans set up. They cycle. Eichel fires one wide. Then there's a shorthanded 2-on-1 that misfires for the Swedes. And then the Americans rush the other way, and they kind of misfire in the other end. This was not the most crisp game. You could tell that the intensity was ramped down a bit for the Americans. And even though before the game, JT Miller said they wanted to bring that same spirit to this game, clearly they knew that the stakes in this game were just non-existent. That they're still going to be in the final no matter what happens. And you could sort of feel that energy here. So, where were we at here? So, U.S. does the same. Boldy has a shot that's blocked and cleared. Miller to Boldy gets blocked. The power play was killed off. Just one shot on net for the Americans during that power play. Nyquist exits the game. Again, the flu running through the Swedish team. So, the U.S. presses with 8 minutes left. Miller fires one wide. Nelson has a fast break chance that saved. The team straight rushes. The U.S. building momentum, seeking that tie. Then Forsling to Arvidsson, there's a near miss. Shots are 9-3 for the Americans with 5.5 minutes left. Connor has a wrister that's blocked and cleared. Arvidsson is denied in close. Sweden presses. They can't get back to the net. Gensel then has a wrister that's saved. The goalie pull-up is with 2 minutes left. The Americans would call a timeout with 1:22 left in the game. Jesper Bratt ices an empty net attempt with 1:08 left. I really wish players would stop doing that with a 1-goal lead. Just saying. When it's a 2-goal lead, fine. But when it's a 1-goal lead, don't just ice the puck. 29.6 seconds left. Then there's a face-off in the neutral zone that was closer to the American zone than it was to the Swedish zone. So you've got to put the goalie back in. So they get the goalie pulled. They do set up in the closing seconds, but Sweden holds on. And this was a pride game, right? Sweden hadn't won a game in this tournament. They do win this one 2-1. The Americans, is the first loss they've suffered in this tournament. So the tournament ends up being pretty close in terms of points. The Americans with 6 points, Canada with 5 points, Sweden with 5 points. Canada, of course, with the tiebreaker because they did beat Sweden in the head-to-head matchup. So the shots on net, 13-8 USA in the first, 9-8 Sweden in the second, 11-6 USA in the third. Final shots 32-33 for the Americans. Power plays, both teams 0 for 3. The hits 20-16 for the Americans. Ersson was fantastic, thus the Flyers jersey. 31 saves on 32 shots. Ottinger 21 saves on 23 shots. Bratt's your first star, thus the New Jersey Devils hat, but Ersson should have been the first star. He's the second star. I think it's highway robbery. Considering what he's played behind in Philadelphia, he had to feel pretty good tonight. Even though he faced 32 shots, it's still a better team than what he plays behind in Philly. Werenski, the third star of the game, because I think he played like all 60 minutes. It felt like he was out there all the time. And so, yeah, it was mildly entertaining through most of it. Yes, it was definitely a notch below the other games in this tournament because there wasn't anything on the line for the Americans. You could see it. That urgency wasn't quite there. The intensity wasn't quite there, as evidenced by just 20 hits in this game for the Americans. They're saving it for Thursday. And for the Swedes, they go out with a win. So no team in this tournament emerged winless. And we will see USA and Canada back at it on Thursday. So let me know your thoughts in the comments section below. As always, don't forget to hit like and subscribe in the event that you may not have done so already. I'm just very happy for Ersson in what's been, I would imagine, a pretty rough season in Philly and not a very happy one, and he's dealt with injuries too. This has to be a good night for him. So congratulations to him and to Sweden on a victory. I don't have a Sweden hat. Otherwise, I might have worn a Sweden hat. But yeah, thank you guys so much for all your support. Hit like and subscribe if you haven't done so already. Thank you guys so much for everything. I will talk to you again soon.